this on this computer. So today we're going to cover economic growth. Economic growth. Why do you think I was so interested in economic growth? I mean, why is this a topic?
Can you turn up your mic?
Sure, Mike, yes, actually, and thank you for that. Thank you so much for that feedback. Can anybody hear me well right now?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, so then that means that whoever can't hear me fine, it's on your device, not mine. Okay, that's troubleshooting right there. Track down the source. So turn up your volumes. And so here's the point. Think about this. I want you to just consider like the big picture, like human history, right? For all of mankind, going back to the start of Adam and Eve, or wherever you want to think about the Genesis, you know, running around in caves and, you know, making fire and, you know, chasing animals and stuff, you know, hunting and gathering. And the whole evolution for all those thousands of millennia. You know, I want you to consider that we struggled as a human race to fulfill our basic needs. That food was not a given, that we had things such as food shortages, even coming up into not that long ago. And it hasn't been until recent times that we as a species on this planet have now escaped from the rest of our animal counterparts in the search for food as a basic necessity, and we've secured for ourselves an ability to have abundance. Do not have to go out and struggle for food. Now, there is a great portion of this population on this planet today that does not have food security. So we haven't quite gotten all the way there yet. But as far as like the ability to escape the need for food, it's something we take for granted, like very, very regularly. But I'll tell you one day, the day that got me to really want to become an economist, I used to live in Seattle, Washington, in the foothills. And I had this apartment that looked over the city. I mean, I could see literally like a third of the state off my back patio. It was amazing. And I wake up every morning super early. And I watch the city come to life. I watch the smoke start to billow, the steam start to billow up, the engine of the whole heart sort of thumping, the thumping of this economy. I look out, I can see all the highways and all the brake lights and the traffic, and it looks to me like blood vessels flowing into this heart of a city that's like starting to warm up like a big engine with the steam coming up. I kind of sat there in awe. And in that moment, I realized my unique birth in the human history. You know, that we're randomly kind of selected to be born at different times, right? And I realized the uniqueness of our place in this world at that moment. And it fascinated me. Absolutely fascinated me. Started to think about, you know, all these deeper things. How do we get here? How do we come to this place, this modern world? Look around you. How do we get here? And the study of all this is in the context of economic growth. Economic growth is it's a trend. It's something that's very long term and in a big sort of timescape. So what I'm going to do to start you off, I've put some interesting resources on Wolf's Den for you to look at, all the resources we're going to look at here today. And what I wanted to show you first off, let me just go to, is one chart that captures 2,000 years of economic history in one chart. This is a share of GDP of world powers. Now, I'll show you there's a couple different ways we can look at GDP, but the interesting thing is to look at the share first off. Because economic growth, what I want to motivate is that we can look at economic growth within a country, and we can also have this idea that, we are actually looking at, multiple countries and looking at the growth trajectories of multiple countries. We can think of countries who haven't yet industrialized and countries who haven't caught up to our modern era. We can think of like how growth is distributed, how it evolves over time. So first off, I wanted to look at the shares of GDP, just as a motivation. Look, going back to, I guess, the year of Christ, you can see that China, so if you read this graph from about 89 to about 30% of the world's GDP was being produced in China at the time. You see, the US wasn't, you had some Native Americans running a hunting and gathering down here. We're just a little tiny sliver. Second biggest proportion, India. Look at the proportion of GDP created between China and India in that slice of time. And then you can see as we evolve along and come into the 1700s, you know what happened in 1760? Started in 1760. Anybody know? 1760 was a year that really changed the world. This was a year for England, the Industrial Revolution kicking off in England. It's when we started to actually harness the power of machines and create mechanical power out of steam. So mechanical power, a steam engine, it translates power into rotary power, which can then be transferred into engines, can be transferred into all kinds of machines. And you see how that really just transformed the whole landscape here. You see the distribution of the GDP by country, and you can see that in 1760, whereas the United Kingdom and France started to really just take off in their share. In America, we start to join in the Industrial Revolution age early. China, you see here, you see that their shares are actually falling. This pie is shrinking. China did not have the Industrial Revolution. And actually, it was kind of interesting how that changes the geopolitics. So there's definitely a link between growth and also geopolitics. When the first English ambassador arrived in China with some gifts, the Chinese emperor at the time looked at him and thought that this was just like some kind of small serf from like a far off village. And China, you could see why. China was just a huge empire. And here comes this guy, and he's just like, oh, this little punk, treat him with this kind of an attitude. But England was a small country, very small country. Think about that little tiny island. I drove across, you can drive from London up to Scotland in like 4 hours. That's almost like the whole length of the country right there. The whole thing maybe take you 6 hours to go end to end, maybe 7, I don't know. But the point is, it's pretty small island, right? Not that many people there, and yet they extended a huge empire. And you think about the English expansion and all the colonialization, and pretty soon they marched up onto China and they ran them over. Okay, they totally ran them over. Because they had the power of machines. It transformed a lot of things. Interestingly enough, I will say that back around the same time period, around the year of Christ, I forget the exact year, but in Egypt, they had also come up with what's called, oh my gosh, what's this? It's what's the name of this engine? They basically had transformed steam power into a rotary motion by boiling a ball and having it spin and transferring it to rotary motion. And they also had knowledge of gears. So when you have steam power, rotary motions, you have gears. Those are the elements to mechanical power. It's very interesting to me to think about this, that they had these components and yet they didn't have an industrial revolution. They didn't combine them. So this is kind of getting to the point, is that it's technology that's driving this stuff. But when we think of technology, a lot of times we think of things in a lab. And actually, when you stop and you think, wait, actually, innovation is also about combining existing things. And you think of like if you think to yourself, like had the Egyptians combined that rotary power and their knowledge of gears and created a machine that started to replace human labor, we could have had a totally different world history. Or instead of maybe instead of speaking English right now, we'd be speaking some foreign dialect that went extinct, and ancient Egyptian that went extinct. Their society went extinct. Basically, their language was dead. But they could have been totally different. You see, to me that's just so fascinating, because you think about like what the real power is behind these kind of things. It's gigantic in terms of its ability to transform just the entire world landscape, and it transformed all of our lives. It's amazingly fascinating to me. Again, you kind of see like in the 2000, what happened in 2003? Anybody know a big event in 2003? In 2003, China joins the WTO. Okay. 1979, which is right about here, China opens up. Before 1979, China was totally closed to the outside world, 100%. In 1979, they open up and they start to take things in. And you see what happens from 1979 onward, and then the continued opening up of China and this expansion of Chinese GDP. So I wanted to show you this thing to kind of motivate you and to kind of get you into a historical perspective, to see kind of how shares of GDP are now being distributed. And you see China's trajectory is increasingly growing, right? And so when I ask you right now, like what's the world's largest economy? It's actually a complicated question to answer, because it depends on how you measure it. So I'll show you this other slide. This is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is great, actually. This is a list of countries by GDP, and it says PPP. Do you know what PPP stands for? That's purchase power parity. Purchase power parity. It means like basically like you look at GDP, but then what they're accounting for is that there's differences in the local prices. So in China, things are a lot cheaper. So because things are cheaper, they can actually buy more with their money. So it's trying to adjust for those differences in purchasing powers. So you get the amount of production, but you adjust for PPP. If you adjust for PPP, China is like leading, it's the world's largest economy. If you don't adjust for purchase power parity, we're the largest economy. But you can see, going back on the trajectory of things, you can kind of see, get the sense that the share of the Chinese economy in the world is increasingly expanding very dramatically. And this gets me to the really key point that is really central for all of you to understand economic growth. And I'm going to show you, there's the real basic formula that you'll need to kind of know. But the idea is that in terms of economic growth, we're really concerned about this trajectory. We're concerned about what's called the growth rate. So when I talk about GDP, that's like a slice in time, right? That's like 1 year I look at GDP. I look at the world's largest economies, and I can look at GDP for a slice in time. But when I'm talking about economic growth, what I'm talking about is the change in that GDP. How is it going year to year? And specifically, how's it going year to year as a trend over time? That's really like what economic growth is about. And so to calculate this, you can look at real GDP and just do it as a percentage change year over year to get a growth rate. So we can calculate this, Why not use nominal GDP now? You should know this, right? Why do we do GDP? Come on, guys. Why would we calculate the growth or economic growth rate using real GDP and not nominal GDP? You guys should know this. This is from last chapter. Why not use nominal GDP and change year to year? Why do we use real? Yeah, because prices change, right? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. It's about, so nominal's not going to account for price changes. You can have huge inflations. The price of everything goes up tremendously, and yet maybe your production falls, but your nominal GDP can be just growing because of price changes, right? So we look at real GDP, and you can calculate the percentage change year to year, and that will be, I'm not going to write it out because you should know how to do percentage changes, but just do percentage change year to year of real GDP, and you get what's called a growth rate. The one thing that's hard to really fathom for most people is to understand the idea of exponential growth and compounding. I really appreciate the mathematics of it, but exponential growth is incredibly transformative. I saw it with COVID. I'll tell you, I watched COVID from the time that there was one case, and I counted the cases. And by the time we hit 12, I went, oh my God, we got some problem here, because I was watching the growth. And by the time we actually had 50 cases, I had predicted I could accurately predict how many cases we would have a week from now, because I calculated the growth rate. And we were on, and I found out very quickly by looking at the pattern that we were on a chart of exponential growth, which, if you know exponential growth, you go, oh my God, this is going to blow up. So look at this. If you do GDP over time, maybe I can show this in images. I'm just going to search. I wonder if I can find something that could give you a hint. This is from 1950s. This is something that's more, I'll see if I can't pull this up. Come on, internet speed. No, don't do this to me. Okay, I don't know if you can see this graph over here on the right. But you see that shape? A shape, it's just like, it's exploding, you know? That's what growth, that's what exponential growth is really. So we have this, and you know, this is the GDP of the UK from 1270 to 2018. And you see their growth when it actually started to kick off in 1760, exponential growth kicked in, and it's been going crazy. So we are on a trajectory that is just like none other in history. And I hope that you can appreciate the path of our traveling and how fast, we're at lightning speed, everything is moving. Economic growth rates are astounding. Now, one thing we can look at, and I think here's another video I'm going to show you. So now that we have this idea what growth rates are, what economic growth is, I want to show you another way to look at how the world has evolved on YouTube. Okay, this is a YouTube video. I posted all this online, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and share this YouTube video. I'm going to get my face out of here. I wish I could I guess I could minimize it. Huh? So this is world GDP. This is purchase power parity adjusted. Okay, keep that in mind. Remember, it's not, depends how you rank things. Do you see China, again, what we saw before, China and India leading the world in terms of GDP. You really have to watch this video to appreciate what modern economic growth really looks like, okay? You see UK comes in. Oh, actually, the years at the top. I'm going to put this down. 1816. Industrial revolution's happening. And UK is starting to hit that exponential growth. UK is hitting growth. France is also hitting it. And you'll see the United States. Where are we? We are, let's pause it. Where's the US here? Japan. Yeah, we're way down here right now. We're way down in this place. UK's booming with industrial revolution. And you see we are starting to jump up the ranks. You know, Russia, Italy, we're jumping up. We're jumping up the ranks. China's still like, and India are still just leading the world by a tremendous amount. There's the first, so the first Opium War in 1839. So that was what I was talking about. That's what I was talking about. The English said, "Oh yeah, we're really this punk," and they show up and they just run over the Chinese in battle and have this big Opium War. But then they, you know, you see the UK empire is just taking off. France, all these countries. It's going to kind of go the same. You'll see what happens when we have this big war. We start having world wars here pretty soon. We're getting into the late 1850s, 1860s. Still, China and India lead the world in terms of how much they produce. US's industrial complex is starting to just like really take off. And UK and US are starting to grow. Now look at I want you to notice the speed at which these numbers are changing. Look at the speed of these things and look at the speed. The China's speed is growing, but look at the speed. It's just actually, it's not that China's shrinking, they're growing, but look at this, look at the US. What happened there? 1881. US is just taking off. Look at the growth. Look how fast those numbers are changing. That is economic growth right there. Look at the speed of this, the speed of how the lines are moving. Okay, that's the thing to really keep in mind here. You know, China's still growing, but UK, and now you're going to have a big world war here pretty soon. I mean, look at the US. Look how fast we are just exploding. I mean, this is phenomenal to watch. China, the last dynasty in China now fell. So you see, like, I want you to notice too that there is some link between economic growth and geopolitical dominance here, okay? We do see this kind of like loose linkage. So we are just going at bonkers speed in terms of our growth. And now you're going to have big world wars pretty soon. I mean, look at us. Look at us. This is phenomenal, isn't it? 1930. Look at, we're shrink. So did you see a shrink? That was actually a period of us shrinking right there. If you can see the numbers going down, that was the Great Depression, right? We have this Great Depression. And Germany, the war machine's kicking in. Second World War starts. And we're left, so we're left after the World War, we're left largely unscathed. All the industrial complexes in Europe are totally bombed out. You know, they're fighting each other. Yeah, our industrial complex is not bombed out. And so we keep building while the world really kind of suffers through a world war. And I just want to see, like, this was the post-World War kind of picture. When you know, the world was battered and we were left on top, you can see actually how much, you know, what kind of domination we had in terms of our production capacity compared to the rest of the world. And it's really no surprise that, you know, that the US was able to really extend ourselves geopolitically across the whole globe. It was off the springboard of that World War. that led us to push out our influence throughout Latin America. I mean, we reached across the whole globe as like a superpower. Now this is why. You can see this chart here. It was this economic dominance that led that. You can really start to appreciate how economic growth has changed your world, in so many ways. I think that's the phenomenal thing here. Communist Party took over in China, and look where China's at now. Still growing, but man, they are way down there now. And they're just falling. You see, they just fell all the way down the ranks. Russia, we get this Cold War starting to heat up. And Russia starts to become somewhat of a challenger. I don't know if you know, but Russia has about the economy size of about Mexico. Okay, just so you can kind of put that into some context. 70s, 80s, Japan starts to rise. The rise of Japan, and there's stuff started, coming in. There's all this talk about, the Japanese, taking over American industry and stuff like this. The Japanese were really did quite a tremendous job in the 90s in their manufacturing. And then look at China's coming back. So remember in 1979, China opened up, okay? So that already happened a little while ago. We missed China jumping up the ranks. 1979, China opens up, and then 96, 97, 98, China's continually liberalizing their trade. And watch, 2003 is going to happen, and China joins the WTO. China joins the WTO. Now look at the economic growth in China. Look at the economic growth in China. Look at the speed at the economic growth in China. This is what you call double-digit economic growth. We grow at about 2-3% a year. They're growing at about 15 to 18 during this time period. That's what you see in the difference. Then China takes over. Remember, this is for purchase power adjusted. 2020, 22. Now they're projecting. Now this is a projection into the future. This is 26, 27. We're not there yet, but So looking back, I'll show you where I was in China from 21. Let's get the years I was there. 13. This is when I came to China. When I first arrived in China. And I saw this happen. That's what I saw happen, okay? That little tiny spurt. It was a period of rapid expansion. And it's something that probably none of you probably will experience firsthand. You'll probably won't ever see kind of a great transformation like that. But China was growing so rapidly, I would call it it almost was I felt like I was almost crazy sometimes. You know that? I felt kind of half insane because I was like, am I having amnesia? Or basically I would go somewhere, and it'd be my favorite place to go. I'd go there. Keep in mind, the Chinese, they really build these shoddy buildings. So even though they just put it up, it looks like it's 20, 30 years old. I mean, from the day it's erected, it looks like it's old. And some how they were doing things. And so I'd go somewhere, it'd be my favorite place, and then I'd come back later and there's this other 20-year-old building there. And I'm like, I swear I'm not crazy. I was coming here to have breakfast, and what's going on? I know I'm really actually one of my strengths. I'm really good at directions. I can find my way anywhere. So I know I was in the right place, and I was just having this weird moment of okay, I'm crazy. This is a 20-year-old building. So strange. And this was kind of a regular occurrence there. I mean, it was just so rapid. And when I first got to China, the US, we were really leading. And so there were so many things that I felt I was frustrated with because they were backwards. Their customer service was just god awful in 2013. And all kinds of things were just god awful. And actually by 19, it's kind of strange, but when I came back to the US, I had the exact same impression as when I went to China. I was like, God, so much stuff we have here is now I feel like they've overtaken us in a lot of ways. I could feel it. Ever try calling a call center? It's Used to be that you would, call a call center, you'd get somebody on the phone, they'd give you instant service, anything you want. Then it started to be that you call somebody and it was, somebody picking up from the other side of the earth that wasn't really like that familiar with like much of, not so helpful. Now you call a call center and you wait on the phone for 20 minutes. It's like the service is as an industry, we've had a huge decline. Why? Because companies are chasing that growth. If you wanted to become a millionaire overnight, that could happen easily in China for you. Because there's so much expansion. You tap into like a small little tiny slice of a market and you're a millionaire. That's why you see so many of these guys coming here with just tons of cash. Because that kind of growth and that kind of transformation, it's like, you get plugged into something, you're like, there's a ton of money to be made there right now. And all the companies are chasing it. And you see, this is where we get kind of thick into the geopolitics of it all, because we have these companies now, they're multinational, chasing profits, and there's different data security issues. We have different data. So data about our citizenry, about all these things, is becoming sort of a national security issue. And yet we got all these companies that are kind of begging to get into the Chinese economy, right? How are they going to serve? Are they going to serve their financial interests? Are they going to have any kind of a patriotic thing? In China, they got it worked out. The Chinese Communist Party is actually going to control pretty much every single high-tech company that they have. There's going to be some Chinese oversight and control within that organization very tightly. That's why people they say, oh, well, TikTok doesn't have, I don't know if you guys do TikTok. But the Chinese company, they say, oh, it's not related to the Communist Party. Yeah, actually, okay, go tell that to somebody else. I don't, I know different. Okay. So anyway, these things were just so transformative, and I wanted to really just kind of motivate you and show you these things. Because it kind of gives us like a sense as to like the trajectory of where we're headed. Let's look at economic growth rates. Growth rates by country. So I wanted to motivate you guys with all this. And then what I want to do is actually get into some of the things that we're going to be really talking about in terms of the class today, in terms of world growth rates. Actually, I'm not going to. Well, these are by country, most recent value. Let me just go. I'm not going to show this anyway. But the point is that a lot of what fueled like the growth in the developing world was actually the opening up to trade. And because the thing that's fueling growth, and I hope you can see it, it's really about technology. It's really about technology. And it's about innovation. That's what drives growth. That's pretty much like the number one thing that I would say almost the only thing that you can consider that is driving modern growth is technology. You saw China did grow even back in hundreds of years ago without industrial revolution. That growth was being fueled by their population growth mainly. So you can grow as an economy as your population gets bigger, you can produce more. But once you adjust for GDP per capita, that is so when you do GDP per person, that those kind of growths disappear. So that's what we're concerned about with growth. It's really about it's really about these long-term kind of things. And here, let me show you something real quick. Now let's get into some of the material here. I wanted to motivate this well because I don't know. To me, it's let me go back. Sorry. Oh, I need to do my camera. So I got to do it this way on this computer. Stop this video. I draw something. So what we're concerned about, and what this class is going to be really focusing on is going to be this idea. So there's two forces. We get growth, economic growth, and then we get business cycles. Those are the two main dynamics. When I say dynamics, I'm talking about those are the two ways that we're concerned about how the economy is evolving over time, is in terms of growth and in terms of business cycles. Two different ways. So let me just share this with, let me share this video so we can all be on the same page. She shares screen. Where's this camera? Okay. What I want to show you something, I drew this out. I actually marked up in my textbook. So I'm going to just recreate it here and then I'll show it to you in your text. But when we talk about growth and business cycles on this dimension, we're looking at the time series of things. So this will be time, typically in years, okay? And we're going to look at, like, say, GDP, which we'd spent all of last class, all of the last section, like figuring out how we measure it. So, so if we plot these things over time, we're going to see something that's going to like move ups and downs, you know, kind of dips. This is actually, I'm trying to draw this somewhat realistically. And I'll show you this plot in your graph, but I didn't want to, I drew in my book, so I want to recreate it. That's what I'm doing. So if this was GDP, and we're going to look at real GDP, what you'll have here is you'll have these moments where there's these downturns, where growth goes negative. Those are recessions typically, okay? Or growth starts to take a when you have 2 quarters of negative growth, you get a recession. So you get these kind of like fluctuations in the business cycle, like we showed you with the unemployments and all those graphs coming about these cycles. And then if you can see these, if you can see this line as that there's sort of a linear trend. So there's a trend here, right? That trend line, if I were just to draw kind of like a line, to fit a line in there, that the slope of that line is what we consider our growth, our economic growth. Now the book's going to introduce this concept to you, and this is a very fundamental one of potential GDP. So you get this idea of potential GDP. This is the GDP you're going to have when we have full employment in our economy. And it's it'll be the basis for all of the equilibrium when we're going to start to do some models. So our potential GDP is the basis that establishes our equilibrium kind of thing. And then you get the actual GDP. So potential is sort of like, you can see that here we actually have, you might have the potential GDP being something like this, right? And then there's periods where the blue line is the actual. So this might be potential. And blue line will be actual. And you see when your actual GDP is less than your potential, that's what we're going to call a recessionary gap. And one thing I want to highlight to you, and this is something that I'll show you in text also to show you the actual graph that I drew this on. But if you draw your potential GDP and then you see here's a big recession, right? There's a big dip. And I want you to consider what year. So let's start marking off years. We'll just do. I don't have years. We'll say this is 2008 recession. This is 09. I'm not accurate about these, by the way. Actually, I should have done 09. Let's do 09 right in the middle there. We'll do this 10, 11, 12, 2012. I didn't draw that accurately because I don't have all the years of data in my head. But I want to ask you a question. So when we look at a business cycle, I could kind of blow this up a little bit. I could kind of like zoom in and pan in on this, and you could have something just, I'm going to try to redraw it like that. So this kind of a recession, you're going to have what's called, this part right here that's called the peak. And this part right here at the very bottom is the trough. Okay, the peak and the trough of the recession. These are things that you need to know. I'm giving you, this is out of your chapter, by the way. Okay. My question is when is recovery? When is recovery? What do you think? When does this economy recover? Go ahead, answer me about this. I just draw up a recession for you. When does this economy recover? Come over here and draw it. Draw it right here. You can draw on like what point on the line do you think that there's a recovery?
I'd say pricing around here.
Right about there?
Yeah, because it gives it time to balance back out. Sort of like you had up here and then here.
Where would recovery happen here?
Right up in here-ish.
Here-ish? So like you think somewhere like right where near just about the same height?
Yeah, because it balances out after you've had your loss there.
And you kind of get back to the same level that you had before. Yeah, this is an important thing here. That is a very, thank you, by the way. This is a concept of recovery that is very common. It's very common. Okay, well, you know, we hit the peak. We had all this negative time, and eventually we kind of get back to that, well, yeah, about that level we were at before, right? Is that recovery? That is a classical idea about recovery. But let me give you another one. When you consider growth on this and you consider potentials, what if I were to say you never recover? Look at this. What if I take this potential line before the recession and I just carry it out? You see? You never get back there again. You never, ever, ever get back there. That's kind of an amazing thought. It's like if you look at the trend line after the recession, you might recover the same growth pattern. So the trend line of growth, you can have the same amount or your economy can be growing the same as it was before. But in order to make up that loss, you'd have to be growing a lot more than you were before. That doesn't happen. You never get back. That's an idea. That's called scarring. This idea is called scarring. That's called an economic scar from a recession. It's actually a very deep principle that applies to all of our lives too in some way. You know, it's like they say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, I kind of believe that. I've gone through like a lot of stuff, and I do feel better as a person from it. I have grown a lot in my life because of like some challenges I faced, right? But some of those like lost years are forever lost, and that has to also be accounted for. So there is sort of a sensitivity of things, right? You never get that back. And that's okay. This is a sort of this is an idea. I'm not saying that this is, I'm pushing this out there. There's different ideas about recessions. There's one idea is scarring. You have a permanent effect. You never get back to your trend. The other opposite idea is called cleansing. The cleansing effect of recession. The idea of cleansing is sort of like, think about like your, like, I don't know if you've ever seen like plants, like if you've ever cared for plants and you have some dying parts, you trim off the dying parts, the plant grows better. This is the idea about cleansing, is that in an economy, you got a lot of firms, some of them are not so robust. You have some hard times, the weaker die off, the stronger survive. Darwinian kind of a idea. And as a effect, everyone in the end is actually more competitive. There's different ways to look at this. That's what I'm trying to tell you, you know. But I'm trying to open up the bigger picture in your text. Now I can just show you what we're talking about here. This is the same thing, like straight out of your textbook. I want to get into one thing real quick before let's see, we have 15 minutes. I'm going to get into this. See, here's this peak and trough. You see the recovery. Again, this is real data. Oops. There's some real data. And you see that same effect. There's a little bit of a scarring here. This is the recession of 2001. Here's the 2008. And you see there's the potential GDP, potential and actual GDP. You see, but if you look at the trend lines, you can see that scar. You see. So, but for the purposes of our modeling, you can see that the potential GDP. Another way to think of a scar is look at the potential. The potential kind of dipped down, and the trajectory kind of wasn't. You know, the potential curved down a little bit after that too, right? This idea, though, about potential and actual GDP is extremely important for us to understand. And you can kind of see the relation between growth and business cycles here. Now, remember I said what's driving this all forward is technology. I want you to think, like, what are the main drivers of technology in our society? Now we can start to peel this onion. What are the things that what are some big innovations you guys are aware of? What's something that you think has changed the world? Okay, go ahead.
Smartphones.
You say production of oil?
Oh, no.
What was that?
Oil, like the car, like the smart cars and stuff.
Smart cars, I heard that online, and I'm just yelling out.
Made it go down.
Steam to oil, okay. And I heard one, so I have smart cars. I heard something online. It was what? Smart cars, and then the gentleman in class said that when we went from steam to oil, it's like gasoline power. Yeah, steam to oil engines, that was a huge one. Go ahead. The media. Social media. Yeah, so think of like the IT booms of all sorts, right? Or smart cars. So what does it take to get these things off the ground? To get this transformation from steam to oil, to get the smart cars out on the streets, to get these to get these social, like you said, social media, to get these social media platforms up and going. What does it take to make that thing run? Now we're peeling back the onion here. You see, we're asking sequential questions to get us back to the source. Okay, go ahead. What gets those things off the ground? Now we're starting to dig at like the deeper question. You see. What gets those things off the ground? Just think, what does it take for us to start as a society to start transforming a movement from steam engines to oil engines? What does it take for that to happen? Yeah, go ahead.
Being able to buy.
Or one person online, I'm gonna hold you just a second in class and I'll take you in just a second. Okay, go, hold your thought though, please. What did you say in class?
You see the limitations.
The limitations what? The limitations, so we have to see the limitations of what we currently have. Who sees those limitations? What kind of person or actor in our society sees those limitations? Do the consumers make the production of the steam engine? Think real carefully about this. What is it? They buy it. Yeah, there has to be a demand. Remember, we model our economies on the demand side and on the supply side, right? So we've split that up. So yes, there has to be like a demand that's satisfied, and you're right, actually, gentlemen here. You're right that there has to be a demand, right? But who creates it? On the supply side, right? Okay, go ahead. What's that? Usually government trying to get more power. Actually, you're hitting on a really good point. You know who created the internet? US government, the military. You know, most innovations actually do come out of military, our military camp. Our military war machine has been incredibly productive at creating all kinds of transformative innovations, from material technologies that make different things more durable on the battlefield, and also make our cars and our shoes and our clothes wear better. All kinds of different types of technologies you're not even aware of have transformed our lives because of military innovations. That's definitely very true. So you see that we've had some. So we have some government types of drivers, but think back to now. I want to take it back though. What's another one? The supply and the demand side. We had on the supply side. Who's making that supply? It's the innovator. It's the business owner, right? It's the person. It's the Elon Musk out there that has a vision about something, right? You have to have these kind of transformative agents. You have to have a capacity for these guys to enter a marketplace. Now, when you go study microeconomics, I'm concerned actually about when I look at the scope. It's too much for us to talk about here, but we have to start to think, how easily can these entrepreneurs enter in and make transformations? Or is it totally shut off? Are you just going to be coming into a place where you've got no chance to come in and enter a market? Our markets can be, you can think about how easy is it for Elon Musk to come up with an idea and put it into action. Well, first of all, what did Elon Musk have to found Tesla? What do you have to have? Money. Lots of money. He had to have lots of money. Now, there's other types of, this is getting at the real heart of this now. You see, we're really digging at the heart. So what is the driver here? Investment. Access to investment is key. You get angel investors, you have financial markets. So now we're digging down deep. Now we're digging deep, and now we see investment as actually a very important function. Now we have to consider, how does investment work in this society, right? What is investment? Well, if you're an Elon Musk, he founded what's that payment platform? PayPal. And he made his bucks there. and then did some more stuff. But if you didn't find PayPal and you're looking for stuff, how does investment work? Typically, you don't have like all the money just to go start up something, right? So how do you get money? Loans, yeah, loans. So there's financial institutions. We have financial institutions that how do they get money? Yeah, we give it to them. Who gives it to them? Savers. Right? You got people like me. Well, I get a paycheck and I put some money in the bank account. And what does the bank do? It's getting a portion of the money maybe I save. And financial institutions are pooling all this stuff together. And there's a supply of loanable funds. You see, there's a supply of loanable funds that comes from savings. You see that? And that savings gets transformed into investments. Now, your book is going to show you some accounting identities that shows you that savings is exactly equal to investment. But then you have to think about like what type of investments are these going into? How is it getting channeled? Is it getting channeled into highly innovative types of investments, or are they just like hedging it into some kind of investments that are not so innovative? That becomes a question. The quality of investment, the quality of the channel that links the savers and the investors, the quality of all those things, and the quality of our financial institutions is just paramount in understanding how economic growth and all this stuff is really working here. See, we peeled that onion all the way back. This is fascinating. So your book's got this, you're going to follow up with this idea of a loanable funds market. And here, this will be your economic model for this chapter that you'll have to get introduced to. It's the start of several economic models to come. So you have a supply of loanable funds that comes from these savers, and you have the demand for loanable funds, people who demand the use of these things. We're going to model this in a supply and demand, a two-sided market again. And what's the price of going and getting a loan? What's the price of getting a loan? A technical term for the price of getting a loan. It's an interest rate, right? So we're modeling it exactly the same as we have price and quantity. Just like it was before, except now it's the price of a loan, which is an interest rate on the top, okay? You got to know that, you got to know this model. So you got to know this model. And there's going to be, again, how your book's going to proceed is it's going to proceed with, showing some different types of things that can shift the supply or the demand of loanable funds and the effects that that's supposed to have on interest rates. So I'm going to give this to you all for homework, okay? And this is part of what you're going to need to do in order to complete your homework that you have. That's assigned to you is look at all the things that shift supply and demand of loanable funds. Okay, make sure you read this very carefully and understand how this model is supposed to be working. There's a bunch of different little things. I'm not going to go through and spoon feed each one of those to you, okay? Go read it. But now you understand the context of how this is all kind of fitting in, right? Why you should care about it and what you need to know here. I really want you guys to focus in on this homework tremendously, because I'm going to give you maybe a shocking revelation next class. I'm going to show you something that if you really do your homework, it should shock you what I'll show you next time. Okay, but you have to kind of be on par with like the material to get what I'm going to show you. Okay, so do your homework and get that part done. These things are just really, to me, I feel like a lot of passion about this chapter. just because it impacts, you saw the geopolitical impacts, you saw how it all comes together. And one thing I do want to show you is look at this. This is, so this is annual percentage change in real GDP. And so if we look at GDP and we just calculate annual percentage changes and then we plot that year by year, you can see periods where there's positive growth, and you can see periods where there's negative growth. So what you have is you have like the real GDP, which will look something like, you know, it's going to look something like this. But when I plot that as a percentage change, as a growth rate, you're going to, you know, it'll put it into something that looks like this. Areas where there's positive growth, the line's going up. Even like right here, the line's going up, it's just not going up very fast. Right here, there's like, the line would take a little dip down. Recession, 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 2008 recession right there. What you notice actually is kind of interesting. This is from 1900 to 2010. That's the last 100-something years. And what you notice as a pattern, and I think this is kind of an interesting pattern. I noticed it when I first looked at this. It stood out to me. What do you see here as a pattern? That the line, this is showing some kind of a, over time, like something is showing a pattern. What kind of pattern do you see? You just look at the line and over time. Let me describe it for you, okay? I'm going to give you an example of how I would describe this graph. So I would say that this graph is so if I look at the center of this graph, it's centered above 0. Like the average, if I were to go like an average across time, it's probably somewhere about there. This would, if I were to draw a center line like this would be the average growth rate of the economy. It's centered about 3 or 4, somewhere about there. And I would say that I would say that it has a lot of volatility around that line that's slightly above that, you know, slightly above 0. So there's, and I would say that there's the volatility looking back in the earlier days was, you see a lot more volatility, and then there's less variation as we come up into the 1950s and forward. You see that there's like less, there's like, it's like a, you know, almost thinking of like a chart, like somebody's like lying, like one of those lie detectors. It's like going crazy right here, and then it kind of slows down and moderates out. What you see is you see actually less economic volatility, and this is called a moderation. And now we can also consider some shocking things about where this might be headed. Next class also, okay? But just notice that trend, okay? And that's it. So anyway, do your homeworks, and we'll see you. I think they're due on Wednesday, right? Is that right? I guess I have homework due Wednesday, is that right?